Every hunting season, thousands of hunters leave one rifle behind before they ever step into the woods. It isn't because the rifle failed them. It isn't because it couldn't make the shot. It's because somewhere along the way, someone convinced them it simply wasn't enough. So they trade it in for something bigger. They buy heavier rifles with harder recoil. They spend more money on expensive ammunition. They tell themselves they're upgrading because that's what experienced hunters are supposed to do. For decades, they've heard the same story repeated over and over again. The .243 Winchester is only for kids. It's just a beginner's cartridge. You'll eventually outgrow it. But what if that story was never true in the first place? What if one of the most successful hunting cartridges ever created has spent the last 70 years trapped behind a reputation it never deserved? Here's the reality that almost nobody talks about. Very few hunters have ever stopped to ask where that reputation actually came from. Even fewer have compared it against decades of real-world performance. And once you do, something remarkable begins to emerge. The .243 Winchester wasn't pushed aside by newer cartridges. It wasn't made obsolete by better technology. In fact, nearly every cartridge that was supposed to replace it failed to erase it from the hunting world. Today, we're going to uncover one of the biggest misconceptions in modern firearms history. By the end of this video, you may never look at the .243 Winchester the same way again. Every year, the same question spreads across hunting forums, gun shops, YouTube comment sections, and campfire conversations. If you could only own one hunting rifle, what caliber would you choose? The answers are almost always predictable. Someone recommends the .308 Winchester because it's proven on nearly every game animal in North America. Another insists the .6.5 Creedmoor is the modern standard for long-range accuracy. Others argue for the timeless .3006 Springfield or one of the newer magnums like the 7 PRC. Scroll through hundreds of comments and you'll notice something interesting. Very few people even mention the .243 Winchester. It's almost as if the cartridge has quietly disappeared from the conversation. But has it really? That's where things stop making sense, because if the .243 is truly outdated, why are manufacturers still producing rifles chambered for it every single year? Why does factory ammunition continue to fill store shelves when so many supposedly better cartridges have come and gone? If it's genuinely too weak for serious hunting, why do experienced outfitters and professional deer guides still carry one into the field? More importantly, why have millions of hunters continued to trust it across generations if it has always been nothing more than a beginner's rifle? Those questions deserve better answers than internet opinions. They deserve evidence. The truth is that the .243 Winchester occupies a strange place in hunting culture. It is respected by the people who have actually used it for decades, yet often dismissed by people who only compare numbers on a ballistic chart. Somewhere along the way, its reputation became disconnected from its real-world performance. New cartridges arrived with bigger advertising campaigns, flashier claims, and promises of longer range or greater power. Yet, despite all of that, the .243 never disappeared. It kept filling freezers, dropping whitetails, harvesting pronghorns, and proving itself season after season without demanding attention. That raises a much bigger question than simply whether the .243 is good enough. The real mystery is how one of the most successful hunting cartridges in American history became known as the rifle people were expected to outgrow. To answer that, we have to go back to where the story really began. When most people hear the name Winchester, they naturally assume Winchester invented the .243 Winchester. After all, it's right there in the name, but that's one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding this cartridge. The truth is far more interesting because the story of the 243 didn't begin inside a corporate engineering department. It began on workbenches, in home reloading rooms, where passionate hunters were chasing a problem that factory ammunition hadn't solved yet. Back in the early 1950s, America was in the golden age of wildcat cartridges. Hunters weren't waiting for major manufacturers to build the perfect round. They were experimenting on their own, cutting brass, changing shoulder angles, and necking cases up and down in search of the ideal balance between speed, accuracy, recoil, and terminal performance. One of the biggest challenges at the time was simple. Hunters wanted a cartridge that shot flatter than traditional deer rounds, but still carried enough energy to ethically harvest whitetails without the punishment of heavy recoil. One of the men leading that search was Warren Page, the legendary shooting editor for FieldStream. Page believed there was untapped potential hiding inside the .308 Winchester case. By necking the .308 down to accept a 6mm bullet, he created a cartridge that combined blistering velocity with surprisingly manageable recoil. Around the very same time, Fred Huntington, the founder of RCBS and one of the pioneers of modern handloading, independently arrived at nearly the same solution. His version became known as the .243 Rock Chucker. Two experienced shooters working separately reached almost identical conclusions that rarely happens by coincidence. The technical reasoning was brilliant. The 308 case already offered excellent powder capacity, reliable feeding, and proven strength. Shrinking the neck to hold a smaller 6mm projectile allowed the cartridge to generate much higher velocity while maintaining excellent efficiency. It produced a flatter trajectory than most traditional deer cartridges, enough energy for medium-sized game, and recoil light enough for almost anyone to shoot comfortably. It wasn't designed to replace powerful elk cartridges. It was designed to solve the everyday problems most deer hunters actually faced when Winchester officially introduced the 243 Winchester in 1955. The company wasn't creating a revolutionary new concept. It was recognizing one that talented shooters had already proven in the field. Winchester supplied the manufacturing, the marketing, and the nationwide distribution. But the original idea belonged to the hunters, who spent years refining it long before the first factory box ever reached a gun store shelf. And that success would soon create a rival that looked even better on paper, until one small engineering decision changed firearms history forever. By the mid-1950s, the stage was set for what should have been one of the biggest rivalries in hunting history. Winchester had just introduced the .243 Winchester, but Remington wasn't standing still. In fact, many shooters believed Remington held the stronger hand. Their answer was the .244 Remington, a cartridge built on a slightly larger case with greater powder capacity. On paper, it looked superior in almost every measurable way. More case volume meant higher potential velocity. More powder meant greater performance. Ballistic charts suggested the 244 should have dominated the market before the first hunting season even began. If you were comparing specifications alone, the contest looked completely one-sided. But firearm history has never been decided by paper alone. Sometimes an entire product lives or dies because of one tiny engineering decision. In Remington's case, that decision was hidden deep inside the barrel. While Winchester chose a 1 in twist rate, Remington selected a slower 1 in 12-inch twist. To most hunters, those numbers meant absolutely nothing. 2 inches couldn't possibly change the future of an entire cartridge, or so it seemed. Here's why it mattered. A barrel's twist rate determines how quickly a bullet spins as it travels down the bore. That spin creates gyroscopic stability, keeping the bullet flying nose forward all the way to the target. The slower 1 in 12 twist handled lightweight 75 and 90 grain varmint bullets extremely well. Unfortunately, deer hunters weren't asking for lightweight varmint bullets. They wanted reliable 100 grain hunting bullets that delivered deeper penetration on whitetails. In the .244 Remington, many of those heavier bullets simply weren't stabilized properly. Some grouped poorly, others began to yaw. In extreme cases, they even struck paper sideways, leaving the unmistakable keyhole-shaped impact that every shooter dreads. Meanwhile, Winchester's 1 in twist stabilized virtually everything hunters wanted to shoot, from lightweight predator bullets to heavy 100 grain deer loads. The difference wasn't dramatic inside the factory. It became dramatic in hunting camps. One hunter told another. Gun writers reported disappointing results. Dealers started recommending the .243 instead. Within a single hunting season, public confidence shifted. Remington eventually admitted the mistake, increased the twist rate, and even renamed the cartridge the 6mm Remington in an attempt to restart its reputation. But by then, the damage had already been done. The market had chosen its winner, and it wasn't because of more powder or a bigger case. It was because one simple number, hidden inside the barrel, changed the future of American hunting forever. If there's one statistic that surprises almost every hunter who takes the time to study the .243 Winchester, it's velocity. For decades, many people have assumed the .243 is simply a mild, low-powered deer cartridge. But once you look at the numbers, that assumption starts to fall apart. With lightweight varmint bullets weighing between 55 and 58 grains, the .243 Winchester can easily push velocities approaching 4,000 feet per second. Some carefully developed hand loads even exceed that mark. Suddenly, this so-called beginner's cartridge is producing speeds that rival cartridges built specifically for long-range varmint hunting. That comparison becomes even more interesting when you look at the legendary .22250 Remington. For years, 22250 earned a reputation as one of the fastest commercial cartridges ever offered to hunters. In many factory loads, it launches a 55-grain bullet at roughly 3,650 to 3,700 feet per second. The .243 Winchester, loaded with similar lightweight projectiles, can actually match or even surpass those velocities under the right conditions. Then there is the iconic .220 Swift, a cartridge that has worn the crown of Speed King for generations. While the Swift still holds an edge in pure velocity with comparable bullet weights, the gap is far smaller than many hunters expect. Even modern cartridges like the .204 Ruger and the newer 6mm Creedmoor enter the conversation. .204 Ruger delivers incredible speed but sacrifices bullet weight and versatility. The 6mm Creedmoor extends long-range performance, yet it builds upon many of the same ballistic principles that made the .243 successful decades earlier. At first glance, all of this seems to prove one thing: faster must be better. After all, higher velocity means a flatter trajectory, less bullet drop, and shorter flight time. Those are undeniable advantages, especially when shooting across open fields or western prairies. But hunting has never been won by muzzle velocity alone. Animals don't respond to numbers printed on ammunition boxes. They respond to what the bullet actually does after impact. A bullet traveling at extreme speed means very little if it fails to expand correctly, penetrate deeply enough, or maintain enough energy by the time it reaches its target. That's where many hunters misunderstand the .243 Winchester. Its success has never been based on being the fastest cartridge in the woods. It has always depended on balancing speed with bullet construction, shot placement, and practical hunting distances. In other words, velocity may grab the headlines, but it doesn't always decide the outcome. And that leads us to perhaps the most misunderstood part of the entire .243 story: its real stopping power on game animals. This is where the conversation usually becomes emotional. Ask 10 hunters whether the .243 Winchester has enough killing power for deer, and you'll probably get 10 different answers. One hunter will tell you it's the most efficient deer cartridge he's ever carried. Another will swear hell never trust it again after watching a wounded buck disappear into the timber. So, who's telling the truth? Surprisingly, they both might be. The biggest mistake people make is assuming that killing power comes from caliber alone. It doesn't. A cartridge is only part of the equation. What actually matters is what happens the instant the bullet strikes the animal. That moment is controlled by several factors working together: impact velocity, bullet construction, sectional density, and shot placement. Ignore any one of those, and the outcome can change dramatically. Let's start with impact velocity. Many hunters focus on muzzle velocity because it's the biggest number printed on the ammunition box. But animals are never hit at the muzzle. They're hit downrange, sometimes 100, 200, or even 300 yards away. As the bullet travels, it loses speed. Once impact velocity drops below the range the bullet was designed for, expansion can become unreliable. Instead of opening quickly and transferring energy into the vital organs, the bullet may punch a much narrower wound channel. That's one reason why a deer hit at 75 yards may collapse instantly, while another hit at 300 yards can run a considerable distance before expiring. Then there's hydrostatic shock, one of the most misunderstood concepts in terminal ballistics. Many people describe it as a magical force that drops animals on the spot, but reality is more complicated. Hydrostatic shock is created when a fast-moving bullet transfers energy into surrounding tissue, producing a violent pressure wave. Higher velocity can make this effect more noticeable, but only if the bullet expands as intended. A bullet that fails to open properly delivers far less energy, regardless of how fast it left the barrel. Speed alone is never enough. Bullet construction may be even more important than velocity itself. Traditional Creedmoor bullets, which use a lead core surrounded by a copper jacket, have harvested millions of deer successfully. However, they tend to expand rapidly and may lose weight when striking heavy bone at close range. Bonded bullets solve much of that problem by chemically or mechanically bonding the lead core to the jacket. allowing the bullet to retain more weight and penetrate deeper while still expanding reliably. Then there are modern monolithic copper bullets. Because they retain nearly all of their original weight, they often penetrate exceptionally well, even from a relatively small cartridge like the .243 Winchester. The trade-off is that many monolithic bullets require higher impact velocities to achieve full expansion, making shot distance even more important. Sectional density is another factor that rarely gets discussed outside experienced hunting circles. Simply put, it measures how much weight is concentrated behind a bullet's diameter. A higher sectional density generally allows a bullet to penetrate deeper before coming to a stop. That's why a well-designed 100-grain .243 bullet can often outperform a lighter, faster projectile that sheds too much energy too quickly. Penetration, not raw energy, is what allows a bullet to reach the heart, lungs, or major blood vessels. This is why the .243 Winchester has developed two completely different reputations over the last 70 years. Hunters who pair it with the right bullet, keep their shots within ethical distances, and place those shots carefully often describe it as one of the finest deer cartridges ever made. Meanwhile, hunters who use lightweight varmint bullets on large game stretch shots beyond the bullet's effective range, or expect it to perform like a magnum frequently walk away disappointed. They aren't necessarily using the same cartridge in the same way, even if the head stamp says .243 Winchester. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. The .243 has never been a cartridge that forgives poor decisions. But when it's matched with the right ammunition and used within the limits it was designed for, its performance has been proving critics wrong for generations. By now, you might be thinking the .243 Winchester is simply a good hunting cartridge that has been unfairly criticized. But here's another twist in the story that surprises even experienced shooters. While many hunters dismissed the .243 as nothing more than a light recoiling deer rifle, an entirely different community was discovering its hidden potential. Competitive marksmen weren't interested in campfire stories or marketing slogans. They cared about one thing above all else: precision, and for decades, many of them quietly recognized that the .243 Winchester possessed qualities far beyond what most hunters ever imagined. One reason was its exceptional ballistic efficiency. When loaded with modern, high ballistic coefficient bullets, the .243 could maintain velocity remarkably well while resisting wind drift better than many traditional hunting cartridges. Wind has always been the greatest enemy of long-range accuracy. At distances approaching 800 or even 1,000 yards, a slight crosswind can move a bullet several feet off target. High BC 6mm bullets cut through that wind far more effectively than many larger, less aerodynamic projectiles. Combined with relatively mild recoil, shooters could stay on target, watch their own impacts through the scope, and make faster corrections between shots. That is a tremendous advantage in precision rifle competition. This performance eventually earned the .243 Winchester a place in disciplines like class and other long-range precision matches. Long before specialized cartridges such as the 6mm Creedmoor became popular, skilled competitors were already proving what a properly loaded .243 could accomplish. In the right rifle, with carefully selected match bullets, the cartridge consistently delivered the accuracy needed to compete at distances that many hunters would never even attempt. Suddenly, the same cartridge often dismissed as a beginner's deer rifle was punching tiny groups at ranges measured in nearly half a mile. Of course, there was a price to pay for that level of performance. Driving relatively small bullets at extremely high velocities creates intense heat and pressure inside the chamber and throat of the barrel. Over time, that heat accelerates throat erosion, gradually reducing accuracy. This is why many competitive shooters refer to the .243 Winchester as a barrel burner. In high-volume competition, where hundreds or even thousands of rounds are fired every season, barrels can wear out much faster than those chambered in slower cartridges. Ironically, what hunters viewed as a weakness was actually evidence of the cartridge's remarkable performance. Most hunters will never fire enough rounds to experience significant barrel wear, but competitive shooters accepted that trade-off because the precision was worth it. This creates one of the greatest ironies in the history of the .243 Winchester. Hunters often criticized it for being too small, while elite marksmen respected it for being extraordinarily capable. The same characteristics that allowed it to flatten trajectories in the field also made it a legitimate long-range performer on the competition range. And once again, the cartridge proved that its reputation depended far more on who was using it than on what it was actually capable of doing. To truly understand why the .243 Winchester has endured for more than 70 years, you have to look beyond the cartridge itself. You have to look at the family it came from. Think of the .308 Winchester as the trunk of a giant tree. From that single design grew an entire generation of cartridges, each developed to solve a different problem, yet all sharing the same remarkably efficient foundation. Few cartridge cases in firearms history have influenced American hunting as much as the .308 Winchester. When Winchester engineers introduced the .308 in the early 1950s, they created more than just another hunting round. They created a platform. Gunsmiths and ammunition designers quickly realized that by simply changing the neck diameter while keeping the same basic case, they could build cartridges for almost every type of hunter. One branch of that family became the .243 Winchester, delivering high velocity, flat trajectories, and light recoil for varmints and medium-sized game. Another evolved into the 7mm 8 Remington, offering heavier bullets with excellent sectional density for hunters who wanted greater penetration without excessive recoil. Then came the .260 Remington, prized by precision shooters for its outstanding long-range efficiency. On the opposite end of the spectrum were cartridges like the .338 Federal and the .358 Winchester, both designed to launch larger, heavier bullets capable of handling tougher game at moderate distances. If you could see this family as a tree, the animation would tell the story instantly. At the center sits the .308 Winchester. One branch stretches toward speed with the .243. Another reaches toward balanced all-around performance with the 7mm 8. Another extends toward long-range precision with the .260 Remington. Still others grow into the powerful .338 Federal and the hard-hitting .358 Winchester for hunters pursuing larger animals. Different bullet diameters, different purposes, one common ancestry. That shared DNA explains something many hunters overlook. The .243 Winchester was never an oddball cartridge or a niche experiment. It was the very first commercial offspring of one of the most successful cartridge cases ever designed. Its success paved the way for nearly every other member of the .308 family that followed. In many ways, the .243 wasn't simply part of a legendary bloodline. It helped prove that the entire concept worked. And while new generations of cartridges continued to appear, one question remained unanswered. If the .243's own family kept expanding, why did one country decide that this particular cartridge was all they needed for generations of deer hunters? If you really want to judge a hunting cartridge, don't just listen to advertisements or internet debates. Look at the places where hunters rely on that cartridge year after year because real-world results matter more than marketing. One of the best examples is the United Kingdom. While the .243 Winchester is often dismissed in parts of North America as a starter caliber, across the Atlantic it has earned a completely different reputation. For generations, it has been one of the most widely trusted and commonly used deer cartridges in Britain. That isn't simply a matter of tradition. It's supported by law and decades of practical experience. In many parts of the UK, the .243 Winchester has long met the legal minimum requirements for hunting most species of deer. Think about that for a moment. Legislators, wildlife managers, and professional stalkers didn't choose the .243 because it was fashionable. They accepted it because years of field experience demonstrated that, when used correctly, it was capable of harvesting deer both ethically and consistently. A cartridge doesn't remain part of a country's hunting regulations for decades if it repeatedly fails to perform. British deer stalking also differs from many forms of North American hunting. Hunters are often expected to place extremely precise shots rather than relying on overwhelming energy. Accuracy, discipline, and careful shot selection are considered just as important as caliber. Those principles happen to align perfectly with the strengths of the .243 Winchester. Its light recoil allows shooters to remain calm behind the rifle, maintain a clear sight picture, and place bullets exactly where they belong. For experienced stalkers, that confidence often matters more than carrying a larger cartridge with significantly heavier recoil. The .243 has also proven itself remarkably versatile across the British countryside. On one outing, it may be used for fox control, where its flat trajectory and excellent accuracy make it highly effective against smaller predators. On another, it may be carried into the Scottish Highlands in pursuit of roe deer, where precise shot placement is essential. In many areas, it has also been successfully used on Scottish red deer under conditions where regulations permit and where hunters use appropriate bullet weights and disciplined shot placement. That versatility is one of the reasons the cartridge became so deeply rooted in British hunting culture. Instead of owning multiple rifles for different species, many hunters learned to master one rifle exceptionally well. Perhaps that's the biggest difference between reputation and reality. In some countries, the .243 Winchester became known as the rifle people eventually moved beyond. In another, it became the rifle that generations of hunters continued to trust season after season. The cartridge never changed. The ballistics never changed. Only the perception did. And that raises one final question. If so many new cartridges have been introduced over the past 70 years, why has none of them managed to erase the .243 Winchester from hunting history? If you've been hunting long enough, you've probably heard the same prediction repeated over and over again. This is the cartridge that will finally replace the .243 Winchester. Every decade seems to produce a new favorite. Every new release promises flatter trajectories, more energy, better long-range performance, or revolutionary ballistics. The marketing changes, the names change, the advertisements become more sophisticated, but somehow the ending never changes. The .243 Winchester simply refuses to disappear. Let's rewind the timeline. In the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, the 7mm Remington Magnum exploded onto the hunting scene. It delivered more velocity, more energy, and far greater reach than the .243. Outdoor magazines celebrated its incredible performance on elk, mule deer, and open country hunts. Many believed smaller cartridges would gradually fade away as hunters embraced magnum power. Yet, when deer season arrived across much of America, countless hunters still reached for the familiar .243. They didn't need magnum recoil to hunt whitetails at ordinary distances. They needed confidence, accuracy, and a rifle they could shoot well. The following decades brought another wave of innovation. Larger cartridges like the AC 300 Winchester Magnum gained enormous popularity among hunters who wanted one rifle capable of handling everything from deer to the largest North American game. Then came the era of short magnums in the early 2000s. Manufacturers introduced cartridges like the .270 WSM and several other Winchester short magnums, promising magnum performance from shorter actions and more compact rifles. Once again, headlines declared that hunting had entered a new era. Once again, the 243 Winchester quietly remained one of the best-selling chamberings on the rack. The new cartridges attracted attention, but they also brought heavier recoil, higher ammunition costs, louder muzzle blast, and performance that many average deer hunters simply didn't need. Then came perhaps the strongest challenger of them all. Around 2017, the 6.5 Creedmoor became a cultural phenomenon. It dominated shooting competitions, flooded social media, and appeared in nearly every discussion about modern rifles. Its high ballistic coefficient bullets, excellent long-range performance, and manageable recoil earned it a loyal following. Some enthusiasts even declared that the 243 Winchester had finally become obsolete. On paper, the argument sounded convincing. In reality, something very different happened. Instead of disappearing, the 243 continued to sell in enormous numbers. Hunters who had trusted it for decades saw no reason to replace a cartridge that had already proven itself season after season. That is the difference between a trend and a legacy. Trends generate excitement. Legacies earn trust over generations. The 243 Winchester never needed to dominate magazine covers or internet headlines because it had already secured something far more valuable: the confidence of millions of hunters. Every decade introduced a new 243 killer. Every decade produced bold predictions that its time was finally over. Yet here we are in 2026, more than 70 years after its introduction, and the .243 Winchester is still one of the most common chamberings found in gun stores, hunting camps, and deer blinds across America, not because it's the newest, not because it's the fastest, but because when hunters need a rifle that simply works, many still choose the cartridge that was supposedly replaced decades ago. And perhaps that's the strongest evidence of all. A truly great cartridge doesn't survive because people talk about it. It survives because people continue to use it. After everything we've uncovered, one lesson stands above all the others. The .243 Winchester isn't the perfect hunting cartridge. But the truth is, no cartridge is. Every caliber is a compromise, balancing power, recoil, trajectory, and practical use. The mistake many hunters make is searching for one cartridge that can do absolutely everything, when the better question is, what cartridge is best for the game I actually hunt? If your seasons are filled with coyotes crossing open fields, whitetails slipping through hardwood forests, or pronghorn standing on the prairie, the .243 Winchester remains one of the finest choices ever designed. Its flat trajectory, light recoil, and proven accuracy make it exceptionally effective when paired with the right bullet and proper shot placement. But if your goal is elk in the Rockies, moose in Alaska, or large bears where deep penetration and maximum energy become critical, stepping up to a larger cartridge is the responsible decision. That isn't a weakness of the .243. It's simply respecting the limits of every tool. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson hunters often learn too late. Success doesn't come from carrying the biggest caliber. It comes from carrying the right one, and after more than 70 years, the .243 Winchester has earned something far more valuable than hype. It has earned trust, not because it is perfect, but because for millions of hunters pursuing the right game under the right conditions, it has been exactly enough. For more than 70 years, hunters have debated one simple question: is the .243 Winchester enough? That argument has filled gun shops, hunting camps, magazine articles, internet forums, and now YouTube comment sections. Every new generation seems to have its own answer, but after looking at the history, the engineering, the real-world results, and the decades of proven success, maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the real question isn't whether the .243 Winchester is powerful enough. Maybe the real question is why so many hunters automatically assume that bigger always means better. Is that belief based on experience, or is it the result of decades of advertising, internet opinions, and the constant promise that the newest cartridge will solve problems the old one never actually had? The truth is, the .243 Winchester didn't survive because it had the flashiest marketing campaign. It survived because generation after generation of hunters carried it into the field, trusted it when the moment mattered most, and came home with results that spoke louder than any advertisement ever could. Cartridges have come and gone. Trends have risen and faded. New calibers have dominated headlines before quietly disappearing into history. Yet somehow, the .243 Winchester is still here, doing exactly what it was designed to do over 70 years ago. So now I'd like to hear from you. Imagine someone handed you one hunting rifle, and that would be the only rifle you could own for the next 20 years. No upgrades, no buying another caliber. Just one rifle to hunt the game you know best. Would you choose .243 Winchester with complete confidence, or do you believe modern cartridges have genuinely surpassed it? More importantly, why? Share your answer in the comments. I don't just want to know what choosy, want to know the experience behind your decision. Did the .243 earn your trust in the field, or did it let you down when it mattered most? This is one of those debates where every hunter has a story, and those stories are often more valuable than the numbers on a ballistic chart. I'll be reading through the comments, and I look forward to hearing your perspective. Until next time, hunt safely, shoot responsibly, and remembers, sometimes the best cartridge isn't the newest one. It's the one that proves itself every time you pull the trigger.